Welcome to this deep dive into a question that strikes at the very heart of belief for billions. Could modern Christianity, this profound force shaping our world, stem from something other than divine revelation? Today we're exploring a provocative idea. Is modern Christianity at its core a giant psychological operation, a deliberate cultural engineering project? To unpack this, let's start with Moses, a figure foundational to both Judaism and Christianity. Moses is presented as the lawgiver, the leader of the Exodus, the receiver of the Ten Commandments. Yet what if I told you there is a startling lack of early evidence for his existence? No archaeological traces, no texts mentioning him before the late 4th century BCE. As Dr. Gad Barnea puts it, there is simply nothing about Moses or an Exodus in the archaeological data. This absence is striking, especially given how meticulous ancient Egyptians were in recording events, victories, defeats, even plagues. The silence extends beyond Egypt too. Take the Elephantine Papyri, a vast collection of documents from a Jewish community in Egypt. Despite living there for centuries, they show no awareness of Moses, the Exodus, or even the Pentateuch. Key biblical names like Aaron, Judah, Sarah, and Rebekah don't appear in their records until much later. This suggests that Moses may not have been the central figure we've always assumed.
Absolutely. These observations challenge the traditional narrative. Moses' absence from early historical and archaeological records raises critical questions. If he was such a monumental figure, why does he first appear in accounts by Greek historians like Achates of Abdera and Manetho? Their versions of Moses differ significantly from the biblical story. Achates portrays him as a rational, philosophical leader, an Egyptian priest who led people into Judea but performed no miracles. Manetho's account is even less flattering, merging Moses with Egyptian folklore as Osarseph, a leprous priest leading a rebellion. Intriguingly, this connects to the Bible's intense focus on purity laws, a possible counterattack against external slander. Then there's Artapanus, who elaborates further, depicting Moses as an inventor, philosopher, and military hero. These variations suggest Moses wasn't a fixed historical person, but a fluid character shaped by different contexts. This development largely occurred in Alexandria, the intellectual hub of the Hellenistic world. Jewish thinkers there likely felt pressure to craft their own cultural epic, to stand alongside Greek legends. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of Hebrew scriptures, played a crucial role, aligning Moses with Hellenistic ideals of law and order. This framing fits perfectly within the intellectual currents of the time.
To synthesize what we've heard so far, Carl introduced the provocative idea that Moses may not have been the historical figure we've traditionally believed him to be, citing a lack of early evidence and contradictions in ancient records. Sophia expanded on this, highlighting how Moses' story seems to emerge as a fluid, adaptable narrative influenced by Hellenistic culture. Together, they've set the stage for deeper questions about faith and history, suggesting that Moses might have been crafted as a foundational figure to meet the needs of Jewish identity in a multicultural empire.
The implications of Moses being a Hellenistic construct are profound. If Moses and the Pentateuch took shape during the Hellenistic period, what does that mean for the religious identity of Israel and, by extension, Christianity? Before the 2nd century BCE, religion in Israel and Judah, what we call Yahwism, was far more flexible. It wasn't the strict monotheism we associate with Judaism today. People acknowledged other gods alongside Yahweh, and practices varied regionally. This shift toward rigid monotheism coincides with the full development of Moses as the supreme lawgiver and the consolidation of the Pentateuch. Could it be that the Moses narrative helped solidify this stricter religious identity? Consider the contradictions in earlier Jewish legal documents, like the Elephantine and Wallia Papyri, which ignore Mosaic laws entirely. Even the absence of patriarchal names in earlier texts undermines the idea of an unbroken tradition stretching back to Moses. Instead, it appears that Israel's evolving identity in the Hellenistic period retroactively shaped the story of Moses. This raises the unsettling possibility that Moses was not just a religious figure, but also a tool of ideological warfare, a narrative weapon designed to define Jewish identity against external criticism.
Exactly. The Moses narrative can be seen as counter-propaganda, a way to push back against negative stereotypes and create a unified origin story under foreign rule. For instance, when Hecataeus claims Judea is barren, the Bible counters with imagery of a land flowing with milk and honey. When Manetho accuses the Israelites' ancestors of being leprous and unclean, Leviticus becomes an elaborate manual on ritual purity. Even details like Moses' stutter seem deliberate, subtly downplaying connections to Greek oratory traditions. This narrative construction mirrors modern propaganda techniques, shaping perception and rewriting history through storytelling. Moses becomes not just a prophet, but an ideologically crafted symbol, a narrative PSYOP, strategic influence operations program, designed to build group identity. And it's this foundation that Christianity inherits and expands upon. The parallels between Moses and Jesus are striking. Virgin births, miracles, resurrections, all motifs familiar in Greco-Roman myths. Early Christian architects likely drew on these mythic structures to create a new religious identity that resonated within the cultural currents of their time.
To summarize this segment, Carl delved into how the Moses narrative may have solidified a stricter monotheistic identity, questioning its historical authenticity. Sophia framed Moses as a tool of ideological warfare, emphasizing how the narrative was crafted to counter external criticism and unify Jewish identity. Together, they connected this evolution to Christianity, suggesting that both faiths built on constructed narratives to shape belief systems and identities.
If we entertain the PSYOP hypothesis that Moses and the Pentateuch were literary socio-political constructs, it leads us to a deeply unsettling question. Is modern Christianity itself a giant psychological operation? By definition, psychological operations involve the deliberate use of information, stories, and symbols to influence behavior and create group cohesion. If the Moses narrative fits this description, then Christianity, which builds explicitly on that foundation, inherits a potentially constructed framework. The implications are enormous. Christianity became the state religion of the Roman Empire, shaping Western civilization, laws, and values. If its origins are rooted in human cultural political forces rather than divine dictation, how does that change how we view religious belief and authority? Are we living within frameworks built on ancient narrative engineering?
Indeed, grappling with the PSYOP hypothesis forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. It challenges us to rethink how foundational myths, whether literally true or not, shape our social structures, laws, and cultural values. Understanding this potential constructiveness could transform interfaith relations and how secular society views religion. It might encourage less literalism and more focus on ethics or community. On a personal level, for someone of faith, this idea doesn't necessarily undermine belief. Instead, it could lead to a more critical, personal, and resilient faith, one not tied solely to literal history. Ultimately, exploring the PSYOP hypothesis isn't about invalidating Christianity or dismissing its impact. It's about encouraging a deeper, more critical look at how faith, identity, and myth intertwine. Narratives are powerful tools, consciously or unconsciously shaped by historical forces over time. Recognizing this helps us engage more clearly with the world and understand how these stories continue to shape our societies and individual lives today.
To wrap up this final segment, Carl posed the provocative question of whether Christianity itself could be considered a psychological operation, given its reliance on potentially constructed narratives. Sophia emphasized the broader implications of this idea, urging a reevaluation of how myths influence society and personal belief. Together, they concluded that while the PSYOP hypothesis challenges traditional views, it invites a deeper understanding of the interplay between faith, identity, and historical forces.